Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Miss Devi Ward Erickson, here with another juicy and delicious episode for you on the #1 resource for holistic sex education on the internet. Each episode is dedicated to inviting all of us to expand our consciousness and to explore the edges, explore the boundaries, and explore the potential of how our sexuality and our pleasure can be a pathway to spiritual growth and personal realization in every area of our life. Today, I have a wonderful guest who is actually an alumni of Sex is Medicine. That's what we get when we're on air for all this time, almost a decade. We get to circle back. And Baljit Rayat you were like in one of my first 3 or 4 episodes. It was amazing. Back in 2013, it was like ancient history.
Ancient history, but one of my favorite interviews of all time. Seriously.
Yay, awesome. So we're going to be talking with Baljit again. Before we dive in, I did want to mention, so I was watching the anti-racist Sex is Medicine episode we did, Practicing Tantra with an Anti-Racist Lens, and I wanted to clean up something I said. I was talking about the DSM manual, which is, I'm going to get the absolute correct definition for you guys here, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. And I said DSM-5. And it's not DSM, I said DSM-V, I'm sorry. It's DSM-5, and I just wanted to clear that because I was listening. I was like, I sound like a total idiot. But what was going on there is the way I saw it was DSM with a dash and then the Roman numeral V. And the way my brain interpreted that was, or actually it's a Roman numeral 5. The way my brain interpreted that was as a V. So that's what I was trying to translate to you or transmit to you guys. That it's the DSM-5, not the DSM-V. You're not going to get your driver's license in mental health. So
DSM, BDSM, you know.
Whatever, something about your mental health.
Yeah.
Something about it. So I just wanted to clear that up. I'm not a total idiot. But tonight, we're going to talk with my lovely friend Baljit about the Akashic records. And instead of reading your bio, Baljit, would you be willing to just kind of share with us who you are, where you come from, and your area of expertise?
Ooh, yeah, there's so much that I do. Okay, well, I'm Baljit Rayat, and I'm an Akashic record consultant and a creative visionary. I'm also a conscious DJ, and I basically help innovators, visionaries to connect to their highest potential.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So we're going to be talking today about the Akashic records and sex.
Yes.
And so, the Akashic records may be floating around in people's awareness of what that is, but could you give us a little rundown of what the Akashic records are exactly?
Yeah, the Akashic records, if you can imagine, it's like an etheric library. We each have access to this etheric library, and it's the record of your soul. It records every word, thought, action, event. So when we access our own Akashic records, we're able to get information about ourselves in regards to our blocks and like how to shift those blocks and any kind of information that you really need, even like past life stuff, anything.
Yeah, so that's a lot of information. That's like a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine that having an understanding of like shit that happened in our past life and shit that's happening in our current life and how that's affecting us on just on the everyday level has got to be incredibly revealing. But how specifically can you apply the Akashic records to awaken more pleasure and sexual empowerment in our lives? I know that's a big, long question, so we can break it out.
Totally. On this journey of sexual discovery, sexual empowerment, and understanding our own sexual energy, one of the things that I discovered personally in working in the Akashic records, and most of the people that kept coming to me were having, they wanted to come and talk about their business and their purpose, but it always related to their sexual energy. And then I started to see a pattern that there is a disconnect to, the womb space, the sacral chakra, whether it was male or female, didn't really matter. It was just that sacral chakra and the root chakra, and there was a complete disconnect. And so what I started to notice in the Akashic records was a lot of programming, whether it was ancestral programming, cultural programming, religious programming, parental programming, subliminal programming, of all these things that get input into our brain and our subconscious field, our mental body. And so then our mental body processes it, and then our emotional body reacts, and then our physical body responds to that reaction. And so that part I noticed was has been shut down for a lot of people. So that's how I was able to discover healing sexual energy through the Akashic records. And for a lot of people, understanding how to deepen their own sexuality, it may be just like a trauma of what someone said to someone, like being bullied, and it shut down that creativity, that creativity, and so by awakening those areas, a lot of people don't realize that it actually relates to sexual energy. And I know you talked about this a lot, Davy, is that sexual energy is like when you experience an orgasm, you get a brush of enlightenment. And that really stuck with me. I remember you saying that, and I said, yeah, like that's what it feels like when I'm in the Akashic records. And I hit that truth. I experienced this orgasmic truth. So you do clear a lot of stuff in the womb space, a lot of deep-seated trauma. So when you engage in, whether it's solo sex or sex with someone else, you're actually able to go deeper. You're able to have this in-depth experience, and you're able to co-create from that space versus just having sex.
Yeah. So something I notice in the field of wellness is there is almost an aversion to directly addressing sexuality. Right? We want to do our yoga, we want to do our crystals, we want to do our candles, we want to do our nutrition, but we don't want to talk about sex. We don't want to address the sex piece. And that's so, and I was guilty of that. If there's something to be guilty of, like most of my life, it was,
Yeah.
sex is just kind of like it's a byproduct, right? It's just kind of like a default setting. It's not something to actively focus on and cultivate and address. In
Yeah.
your work through these many, many years, a decade that I've known you just about, how important is it for your clients and for people in general to be willing to directly address the sexual component in order to heal and free up energy to then co-create in their other areas of life?
Mm-hmm. You know what, Davy? It is so important. Like that's kind of the very first energy that I approach, like automatically, because it is the sacral chakra. Most of the people that come to me are visionaries, they're creators, they're innovators, they're people that want to know what their purpose is. So if someone's disconnected from their sexual energy, they're always going to be searching and taking so many courses. And I remember being that girl, like learning even white tantra. I was like, I didn't understand, I didn't experience sexual energy to its depth because I wasn't getting the practical um, connection with sexual energy. And so I was like, all right, I'll explore red tantra. Like I was really like, what, I need to go deeper. Something's not right with this wellness thing that I'm, and I've noticed with back then, I'd say even 10 years ago, with a lot of healers and then the wellness practitioners, is that there's this bypass of, you know,
Yeah.
ignoring sexual energy or putting that into a separate container,
Yes.
right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Separating it out. Like it's
Yeah.
like, like it's on a side
Yeah.
plate. It's not on your main
Exactly.
plate. It's a
Yeah.
side dish. A side
It's
dish is
not a side dish. It
not
is your
a full
main
meal.
dish. Yeah. It's the first thing you eat. So what started to happen though is naturally through that, then I started to get more clients that, have been trafficked, have been raised in cults, or are in the process of writing a book because they need that womb activation. And there's so much shame attached to sexual energy, especially in the wellness community. And so we need to heal that guilt and shame and really understand that our sexual energy is our spiritual energy. It is our creative life force. So we can't just separate it as a side dish and come back to it later because that's the missing ingredient. It's one of the main ingredients.
Wow. Yeah. And arising from that is wanting to explore, and you may have already touched upon this, but the thing that I'm always curious about, that I always want to drill down into, is like the intricate reasons for why our sexual energy is so vital. So yes, it's creative life force energy. Yes, it's, part of our spiritual essence. Yes, yes, yes. But why is sexual energy so potent and so powerful? Are there teachings about that in the Akashic records? Like the why human sexuality,
Mm,
particularly on a universal scale, why is
mhm,
human sexuality so vital? It's
mhm.
so essential to being a whole, healthy, integrated human.
I love that you asked that question. It just gets me so excited. I'm like, let me tell you why.
You have access to the whole freaking library.
For every individual, it is about tapping into our greatest power. So when we connect to our own sexual energy, like, why is it so important? Because we access our own inner power. What is inner power? It's our truth. It's our authentic truth. We can feel into those areas of truth that you would not be able to feel into if you were disconnected from your sexual energy. And you know, when I say power, I mean power of being in your truth, not control or manipulation. It's really this deep sense of rooted power. And that's why I really resonated with authentic tantra. Is when I learned that too, Davy, it was because I felt the sense of groundedness. That's when I started to really experience my authentic power. And I was like, oh, and then I was having these multi-orgasmic experiences too. And I was like, okay, this makes sense because I was rooted. I was really accessing my sacral chakra through the Akashic records. I was able to see my stories and clear and heal and do so much. So yeah, it's about authentic power.
I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
because you will find this fascinating. So I'm studying Tibetan medicine, and they talk about the three minds. There's
Mhm.
the regular mind, there's the subtle mind, and there's the very subtle mind. The very subtle mind is where you tap into your Akashic records.
Oh, chills.
It holds all of the memories of all of the lifetimes you've ever lived and will ever live. And it
Yes.
has like instructions and codes for accessing and awakening your Buddha consciousness. Guess
Wow.
where it lives?
Where?
In your sex chakra.
What?
Yeah. So you access your
Yeah.
own Akashic records through orgasm. There's only a few ways that you can access your very subtle mind, and they're through these altered states of consciousness. So in the medicine book that I'm reading, it's like, oh, through
Wow.
meditation or extreme sports or near-death experiences. And then they're like, are you sexual orgasm?
Yeah.
Out of the bag. But orgasm is a way to crack open our own, to open the door to our own library of
Yep.
our own Akashic records, and the import of being able to heal from sexual trauma in this lifetime. So, like, if I'm sexually traumatized and that goes unresolved, I'm carrying that trauma into all of my future
Yep.
lifetimes. I'm
Yep.
carrying the memory of that and the imprint of it.
Totally. Oh my God. I so love that. Totally. It totally gets stuck in your cellular memory so that when you access the Akashic records, you can transmute that through your cellular memory. And it could be transgenerational. It could be, and when I mean transgenerational, it could be like 7 generations of alcoholism, you know? And imagine what that does for your sexual libido, right? And we don't realize that we've even being birthed out of our mother's womb, and what was our mother's experience giving birth. There's also trauma, birth trauma, that we may have taken on and imprinted. So every time, let's just say the birth was traumatic and it was hard birthing, then your story as a child growing up as an adult, anytime you try to birth a project, it's always traumatic. It's like we carry these stories through cellular memories. Um, so, and then the sexual energy is also, you'll notice when you heal that, you're able to experience these deeper, like, depths of your sexual energy through the healing. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I find that again, when we start, coming from this culture, when we talk about sex, it's very generally located. It's very, specific to this thing that's happening in the bedroom when we start thing. But
Yeah.
as we begin to unlock it, it begins to infuse every area of life. And it's just like a vitality and a joy and a pleasure that's woven into every activity that we do.
Mm-hmm. 100%. 100%.
And that's a life worth living.
Exactly.
So, what are some of the common blocks that you encounter in your work to people being able to easily just go there and connect with their sexual energy?
Hmm. Um, a lot of it is a lot of women don't know. I get a lot of women that come to me who've never experienced a full body orgasm or can't orgasm. Um, some of them have had a hard time connecting to their purpose. Uh, or they're afraid to create, they're afraid to sing and express themselves. So there's a variety of expressions, like of expression, fear of expressing. And so when I dive deeper into that expression, it's like there's like a story behind with why they can't express that. Yeah. And there's something else too. Yeah, they're just a lot of the times it's like a disconnect from the root chakra and the sacral chakra. And so they're taking a lot of courses and it's just like totally avoiding the sexual energy. So sometimes I even ask straight up questions. I say, how many times do you self cultivate? Do you masturbate? Do you self cultivate? And they're like, what? They're like, what do you mean? And so I even give them play work with cultivating that energy for themselves so that they can connect back to that sensuality and experience that connection. Because what happens is that they then fall into too much of a yang energy and then they forget about the yin. And we need both the yin and the yang. So that sensuality piece is part of that yin energy. And if you're always yanging and you're just denying all access of your yin, then you're not able to really connect to that piece. So yeah, it's a major block. And also depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, that usually relates to feeling disconnected to your sexual pleasure. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it seems like it doesn't seem like it is. We live in a culture that's, disconnection is all pervasive. That's like the
Yeah.
suffering in this culture, and particularly disconnection from our sexuality. In my opinion, is, that's because of the culture that we're raised in, and we learn about sex from our parents, right? If our parents are disconnected, we're going to be disconnected too. Where do we learn connection if we don't see it modeled for us?
Yeah.
Your view, working with, from your perspective, what are some of the reasons that those blocks are in place? Like, why are we disconnected from our sexuality as individuals and as a society, in your view?
Yeah, because a lot of us weren't taught how to connect to our sexual energy. It was like when I think about school, it was like, here's a condom, don't get pregnant. Here's a penis, here's the vagina, and boom. It wasn't,
Ta-da!
yeah, it wasn't like how to pleasure yourself. It wasn't about uh, connecting. And nor coming from an East Indian background, I didn't get the talk from my parents about sex, except my mom. She was just like, there's AIDS out there, and I'm like, yes, mom, I'm aware. That was like a long time ago, and so that was traumatizing. I was just like, what? Like, it was just, everyone was so scared to talk about it, so it built more fear. And I feel like everyone, back then, I think it's changing now, like more people are having conversations about it to their young ones. There's so much fear and shame embedded to even talk about it, so we just were not taught about connection,
Mhm.
basic connection.
Yeah, yeah. we avoid it. I feel so sorry for our parents, our poor parents.
I know.
Gotta be so coming. I could just see your mom. You know, there's lots of each other. What she really wanted to say is, Baljit, I love you.
Yeah, totally.
Take care of yourself. I want you to be
Yeah.
healthy and well.
Yeah.
Came
I
out.
was I was like
That's amazing.
14 years old and she's like, come on, sit down. And then I was like, and she's like, there's a lot of AIDS out there. I was just like,
That's your sex.
yeah. I just was like, thanks, Mom. Because I knew she was coming from a heart, but I was trying not to laugh. I was like, wow, this is fascinating. Yeah.
So with Akashic records, how does one go about exploring their sexual blocks and the blocks and all, because we're not just we're sexual beings, but we're all
Hmm.
beings as well, emotional beings, mental beings, spiritual beings, and all of them are interconnected.
Yeah. Hmm.
But in the work that you do, how do you even begin?
Yeah. So all of my sessions, I do it by phone. I don't look at someone because I'm actually able to see someone's geometry intuitively. And the way that I visualize it is that I can see what's going on. I'll just be shown, we call it the record keepers, meaning your guides. And we each have our own record keepers, our own, call it your higher self that's connected to your Akashic records. They will show you information about exactly what it is. So it's like, let's just say I did a reading on you and you're like, okay, what do I need to focus on? And maybe I'm like, oh, I'm getting that we need to focus on the mental body. And then, so yes, we've got the spiritual body, the mental body, the physical body, the emotional body, and all our other bodies. But your record keepers and your Akashic records will pinpoint what we need to focus on. So that's why we need to have an intention. So for someone, if they're like, hey, Bal, I really want to write this book, but I'm having huge writer's block and I don't know what's going on. And then I open up the Akashic records and then I'll just be shown, oh, it just feels like there's an emotional thing. And I'm seeing that their heart's really blocked. And then I'll go deeper. I'll ask the record keepers, I'm like, please show me more. And I'll actually be shown maybe it's a connection to their mother about receiving information. Maybe they were taught that they were crazy for thinking of certain ways. So I'm able to see patterns and beliefs. And then I bring it forward to the client. And the client, we already know what our truth is. It's the muck that we're releasing, right? So I'm just reflecting back as a conduit what a soul knows already, know deep down inside. And then they're like, oh yeah. And then I connect the dots for them. I'm like, do you see how that shows up in relationship too? How guarded you are. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, cool. Do you notice how that works with money? And they're like, yeah. And then by releasing the belief system, we bring in a new belief system that actually is of higher service to them, that is of benefit to them. And so it's healing that cellular memory. And when you heal yourself, you're actually healing generations. So you are healing your mom and your dad. You are healing your ancestors beyond. So it's one of the deepest healing tools that we have access to. It doesn't matter how what training it is, but it's just like once you access the Akashic records and you're able to see where you'll just be shown, or depending on what your intuitive language is, you'll be able to pinpoint whatever that energy is that needs to clear. So it'll just reveal itself to you, what's predominant, and it changes all the time.
Yeah, that's so resonating. In our tradition, we talk about how when you become aware of an issue, it's in the process of purifying.
Yeah, totally.
Just by bringing it to the surface, often is what's required to release it.
Exactly. And that's totally what it is in the records. And then what happens is usually right afterwards, that person just starts to take action because they've cleared it, depending on their soul's readiness of when they're choosing to shift. So everyone's different. So yeah, it's the same with Tantra. It's like it comes to the surface, and then the rest will follow from that.
So what has this process been like for you? Because you haven't always been an Akashic record reader, and you are now. And so what has that journey been like for you to be able to move through your stuff clear, and then claim this potent ability to support other people through that same process.
Yeah, it's been one of the most important toolkits in my entire life. I was at a point where, age 23, I was semi-suicidal. I had depression, panic disorder. I was raving, living the Sex and the City life in Toronto. And I just hit a tipping point asking for answers. And long story short, when I discovered the Akashic Records, I realized how many layers of illusion that I had made up for myself. Being raised an East Indian girl, there was so much pressure as an Indian girl to marry into the East Indian culture and be married into, the family and live with them. And every part of my soul was like, no, this doesn't feel right. Excuse me. And then I was in architecture for 7 years, so working in that, it's funny that my throat's clearing. Working in architecture, I was feeling disconnected from my purpose. So with the Akashic Records, I was able to claim back my power piece by piece and learn how to set healthy boundaries with people. I was an official certified people pleaser, and just not being a stand for myself. And there was the Akashic Records helped me really heal so many deep layers. I healed the relationship with my mom, um, traveled across, from Toronto across Canada to live in Vancouver, start a new life, and went full time in my holistic business. So, and then on top of that, learned how to DJ, got more into creativity, and really started to explore my sexuality, it was just really important. I let go of a lot of religious and cultural programming that was limiting my access to that deeper power. So the Akashic Records for me has played it's been so crucial for me, and I still obviously use it and I teach it, but it's just, yeah, it's been very profound, very, very profound.
Thank you for sharing that. And so clearing blocks around your sexuality, and you mentioned being East Indian. What were some specific blocks associated in relationship to sexuality that you had to clear from the East Indian tradition? You don't
Mm-hmm.
mind sharing.
No, not at all. Well, back then, it's again, culturally, things are shifting now. When a girl was born, uh, girls were not celebrated. They were seen as dowry, right? Um, and
Like
when boys, pardon?
like cattle, like
Yeah, yeah. And so, and when boys are born, they are completely celebrated. Parents hand out sweets to other families and communities. So right off the bat, girls were just never celebrated for even existing. And and yet, some families treat the Indian females like with respect, but we've been programmed to um, please everybody, to please our family, to please the culture, learn how to make roti, learn how to make chai, be a good wife, and be successful. So there's just all this pressure. And so to even connect to your sexuality, and it was just so conflicting because when we look at Kama Sutra and then the teachings of um, Kama Sutra and the East Indian culture before the British colonized India, it's like the women were very connected to their sensuality, and the mothers would pass down the tradition of connecting to their sensual nature, and that got cut off. So it's almost like this colonization repressed and oppressed our Indian, I want to say the Indian sexual heritage, like just the energy. And I I really felt that. That's why I needed to explore more about my sexuality, because I was like, something doesn't feel right. Like, women need to be celebrated, and we are known to embody our sensual energy. We have our adornments and stuff. And yet, culturally, we are programmed to not be too sexy. And then you watch Bollywood, and Bollywood movies are just like super, the actresses are super sexy. So it's just incongruent on so many levels. So I had a lot of trauma around not being able to connect to that part of myself. And when I first got my period, I remember my parents being really upset. And I I had to learn on my own how to put on a pad and like how to understand like what a period was. So, and I got it when I was 10 years old. I actually didn't tell my parents till a year later. So I had to learn on my own how to be a woman, which was really traumatizing. And that imprinting really stuck with me. So later on, when I learned the Akashic records, I was really able to heal that part because I had a lot of resentment towards my mom. And my mom was very, she had trauma from her past. So she was very strict with me, especially in regards to how I looked and what I could wear and not wear. So, when I became a teenager, I rebelled. I wanted to do everything opposite of that, which created more trauma. And then, as an East Indian girl living in a city that was predominantly white, a lot of white boys didn't know how to be with an Indian girl. Like they really didn't, or any other colored girl. Um, so I had some traumatic experience, not too traumatic, but traumatic enough where it imprinted a belief system. And I'll never forget this one. But I remember in college, I had this lover, this white guy, and really, sweet and everything. And he was just like a lover. Like we would just go and have like ravenous sex. It was amazing. And this one time we were just like typing on MSN, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to meet up?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "You?" And he goes, "Yeah, I could sure use some ethnic takeout." And I just was like,
Whoa.
and it just hit me really hard. I was like, wait a second. Like, does he just think I'm like this takeout? Like he obviously he does. He just called me an ethnic takeout. And I started to reflect on, the other guys that I've met and dated in my early 20s. And I was like, oh, they all don't really want to commit. Like they see me as a certain type. So that imprinted inside of me. And I've had to really unravel that even up until my like 30s of that imprinting of dating other men that were not Indian. So working in the records helped me to unravel the cultural trauma and then the trauma of dealing with excuse me, with society as well. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that, because I remember having a similar experience growing up as a black, biracial
Yeah.
black woman, right? Light skinned black woman in the States. And the
Mhm.
white boys would always want to fuck me, but
Yeah.
like did not want their parents to know. And in fact, I had this one really cute little white boy that we adored each other. We did not get to the sex part. We were still just at that like making out. It was all sparkly new. And his parents found out that we were dating and threatened to kick him out of the house if he
Wow.
stopped dating a black woman.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think that people don't understand how fucking traumatizing that is to our psyche. Because it's one thing to like, oh, I don't want to go out with you anymore because I don't like you, or whatever, we're not a fit. But it's another thing when it's like it's because of your heritage, it's because of your ethnicity that you're not being valued. The soul crushing, dehumanizing experience.
Hmm.
And it's repetitive. It's not just that it happens once, right? It's like
No.
because racism is systemic,
Yeah.
right? It's for all of us who are non-white, or full of lots of color and rainbows.
Yeah, yeah. And it continues. Like because I didn't heal that part of myself in my early 20s, in late 20s when I started working in architecture, what then happened, because again, it became a sexual imprinting, right? I then started to attract like married older white men that wanted to have an affair with me. I've been approached by married white men, and I was like, what in the F is going on? And what was so fascinating, Davey, is a part of myself was even tempted, because the wounding was like, well, if this is the only way to receive love, then maybe I got to go this route. Luckily, I didn't go that route, but it was so traumatic. And then I really had to look at that as soon as it got to work, with being approached by, I think it was the last time was a man who was married and was like, we should go out. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't. And then yeah, I actually had to get my own mentor to go into my records to see my own blind spots, because I was like, I have this deep imprinting. I'm like, this needs to stop. Like, no, yeah. So it does stick to you, like with you, till you shift it. And I don't think people realize, and even of ourselves, that just that one thing that can happen to you as a child or even in your teenage years, especially with systemic racism, um, it creates such a deep ripple effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's coming to mind on that, again, as you said, the cultural reference in that India was colonized. So
Yeah.
the colonization is fucking irreparable trauma. I mean, like, it's not like, oh, we were colonized. It's like, it was brutal.
Yeah, it was fucking brutal. Yeah.
Destroyed civilizations. You destroyed entire families and social networks. It's not this like pretty thing. So that imprint also lives inside of us. So I just think of it as this cumulative thing. It's not like, oh, I just had this little boy that didn't like me one time. I come into this world carrying the legacy of brutality and violence that has been inflicted upon my people. That's already there. That's the foundation. And then on top of that, you layer, all the other stuff that goes along with living in a system of white supremacy. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And then how that directly impacts our sexuality until we're able to shift that. So what happened for you when you were able to dig in there and start rewiring those patterns? What did you notice in your life? What occurred?
Definitely me recognizing my own boundaries and really being able to express my truth and then actually being submissive. I was like, no, like I was able to really, I still am able to really express myself and be super clear. So boundaries, and then also just stepping into my power, and what that has reflected back to me just in relationships, even with men, is I feel like now I'm being completely honored, and there might still be that 2-degree thing that I see once in a while from a white man. And I'm just like, yeah, no, I'll just be able to see it.
Yes, you
I
can.
just, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It had to come up. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you see for your clients? So I want to also preface this is that your work isn't only addressing sexuality. So like if someone's like, hey, I just want to work with Baljit to, open up some area of my life where I'm feeling really stuck, it doesn't always have to relate to sexuality.
Yeah.
But when it does relate to sexuality, what are some of the things you've seen, results you've seen with your clients when they're able to actually dig in there and rewire that?
Yeah. Well, right now I'm working with someone who is from the LDS community, and she was able to escape that, and she was trafficked.
Oh, what is LDS community?
Church of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
So from Mormon community. So she was exposed to satanic rituals. So, being trafficked to other older men by your dad, satanic rituals, and other things. And working with her has been very profound in the Akashic records, because it to witness her come back to her own power and build the level of confidence to be a voice for many other women and men that are still in it and trying to escape. So she's in the process of working on creating a podcast with a pseudonym to help other people escape that. And she's shifted so much. For someone else, I've helped them, launch the book, as you know, Julie Archambault. She yeah. Shout outs to her. She has so much talent, and it really is, when you access the Akashic records, it's like what really people are asking for is to be seen. And what I just reflect back is like, hey, I see you beyond even the shadow pieces. Like, I've worked with a lot of men who've been addicted to porn, other things, and they're just out and open with me. And there's no judgment when you access the Akashic records, because you're able to assist them and understand why they have these certain addictions. And for example, with porn, what I've noticed a lot with men who watch a lot of porn, that isn't like conscious porn. It's more of a way of an escapement. It's because they're trying to direct that energy somewhere, and they don't know where to direct it. They don't know where to direct their emotions or their anger, because they were taught to not express their anger and not express themselves. So they have to be this cookie cutter, corporate guy. And so many of the people that I've worked with have come to really, what it really is, Davey, is that they really want to connect to their mission, and they really want to connect to their gifts, and they want to know how to express that. And what tends to happen is we do have to explore the sexual piece, because it is a big ingredient. We can't ignore it.
Especially,
Yeah.
I would say, for men in the society, there's
Yeah.
so much. The wounding around sexuality in the society for people
Yeah.
of all different styles of genitals is just, it's all pervasive, right?
Yeah.
And there's very specific like types of wounding depending on your gender identity and if you're cisgender, right? And so particularly for men, they've got the circumcision trauma, which I talk about often, but so much shadow around their sexuality, so much toxicity around their sexuality, and so much, so no rites of passage, and so much
Exactly.
like you say, the porn addiction and the normalization of the use of pornography as a support for sexual connection, or a substitute for sexual connection.
Yeah, totally. And even I had a client who came out as bisexual, and her background is, she's she's a smiley. So being Muslim and coming out is a big thing. So it's a lot of confidence building of being a stand for who you really are, and being a stand for your own sexual nature, and learning to claim back your power. So, and like, you're unfuckable, like you're just, yeah.
And that's what I'm hearing over and over again, is the root of our sexual energy is
Yes.
our power. It
Yes.
literally is our creative life force power. So it serves the powers that be,
Yeah.
the society, to have good little servants,
Yeah.
good little wage slaves for us to be
Yeah.
from our power source. But what I'm hearing is that when your clients are able to reintegrate their sexuality and reclaim their sexuality, they're no longer willing to tolerate fucking bullshit. And
No, they just come out of the slavery template. Yeah.
yeah, it's exactly the complete rewiring of the basic template of who we are as individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question that arose: are you able to do Akashic record readings for like communities and cultures?
Yeah. I've done groups. I can do cultures. It all depends on, what the container is. And that just naturally will, be created. So I've done that I just did a mastermind a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago for someone. They're like, I want you to do a reading for my mastermind group. And they're all like visionary people. So yeah, even cultures, different religions. Yeah.
Because it comes to mind when we were talking about colonization, right?
Yeah.
Amazing it would be to unravel or unweave that imprint from the entire, society.
It's funny that you asked that, because I literally was thinking about that this morning. I was like, I do work with a lot of Indian women. I'm like, I should really do an Akashic record healing circle around healing a lot, like releasing a lot of cultural programming and sexual cultural programming. Because there's still so much avoidance around that, and it's like we need to really reclaim that. It's so important, especially now more than ever. We have to use our voice. We've got to connect to our gifts. It's like it's just time.
Well, East India was the birthplace of spiritual sexuality, right? So the fact that it was, that cord or that connection was severed through the trauma of colonialism is horrific. And the fact that the distortions that are arising now, when the root was this brilliant, it was this wellspring of knowledge and understanding, and how our sexuality is like fuel for realization. So it's criminal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. So profound. And I love exploring the many ways that our work in the world can help us all as humans, with all of our history, reclaim our birthright to pleasure and joy and our own power.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy connecting with you and diving deep into this topic and more.
So how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, people can reach me on my website at lotusdestiny.com. Even my Instagram and Facebook is Lotus Destiny. My DJ Instagram is Antakrana, but that's also on my Lotus Destiny website. So you can visit my SoundCloud if you want some intentional DJ sets to get you in the mood and move those creative juices. I really put a lot of intention to activate the sacred fire with each DJ set. So yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful passion. I love the music, balancing the energy body. That's balancing and enriching the energy body.
Yes.
Wonderful. And we'll have all those links below this video, so everyone can just click a link and access our beautiful Baljit at lotusdestiny.com easily and effortlessly. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I do want to say that we did have a special guest of my dog, Biniyaka, join us. He's over there sleeping by our shrine now, our messy shrine that I tried to cut out of the video, but there he is, holding it down for us.
Thanks, Devi.
And just another reminder that we are doing Sex is Medicine shows every Thursday at 7 p.m. There will be a new episode for the remainder of November. And then we're taking a break for December and January, but we will have wonderful collage of reviews from our last 7 years of being on air. So make sure you still tune in every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific, and make sure to stay connected in between every show at authentictantra.com and Authentic Tantra on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the awesome places. Love you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a beautiful, beautiful holiday.